One of the most talked about fly fishing techniques of today is the very popular Czech nymph method. For many years it was mainly competition fishermen who used it, but now it's being reported on in the sports fishing press all over the world. As the name implies, this technique has been developed mainly in the Czech Republic over the last 20 years. To learn more about this fishing method, we've arranged to meet a former coach of the Czech national team, Dr. Karol Krivanic, in southern Bohemia, near the Austrian border. The area is very hilly, the steep slopes interweaved with lush green valleys. And here you can find some of the most popular fly fishing waters, with grayling, trout and rainbow trout. The Vltava River runs through the village of Rosenberg. This is where lots of fly fishermen have met over the years for competitions or to learn about the Czech nymph method. We're going to meet Karol on the outskirts of the village.
Hi, Karol.
Ah.
Have you already got a fish? Oh, God.
Ah, broken.
Is this the famous river?
Yes,
Moldova.
Vltava. Nice to meet you. Hello.
Hi.
Hello, my friend.
Hi.
Welcome in Czech Republic and in South Bohemia.
It's great to be here. The area is fantastic. But the rivers, they're beautiful. Is this the typical rivers where you normally fish, Karol?
Yes, it's mine river. Upper and lower part of Vltava River is my favorite.
So this is typical Czech nymph river?
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's great. What kind of species of fish do you have here?
Here is main fish is brown trout, rainbow trout, grayling and some brook trouts.
Some brook trouts as well. So what will the plans be for the week?
My friends have to show you how to fish in that hard condition in summer months. We have some trips to different rivers and maybe we catch some fish.
Oh, that's going to be great, really, really nice.
And you have to try fishing.
Yeah, I'm going to go up and get my things and we give it
a
short try. All right, see you in a
tight
minute.
Line.
Yeah.
Když nejezdíte, tak jo.
The basic idea of the Czech nymph method is to imitate the nymphs and larvae that come drifting in the water. Even though Karol wasn't an active competitor while he was national team coach, he is a complete master of the Czech nymph method. The Czech nymph method can be practiced in several different ways, so Karol's arranged for us to meet different fishermen, each one an expert in the different variations of the method. Tomorrow we're going to meet Milan Ladnic and František Tobias, who are both very skilled at the traditional short distance method. Today we're fishing further up the Vltava, where the river's narrower than in the village. The stretch we're fishing is fast and well suited to traditional Czech nymph techniques.
Jmenuje se to hovno, tady ta puška?
Shit fly. Imitation of shit.
Realistic.
Native.
Milan and František belong to the younger generation of Czech nymph fishermen, and both learned to use the method in their youth.
Ta by stejně vypadla.
To by vypadla, víte.
Jak já ti dám nějakou.
Proč tahle byla připravená?
To je dobrá.
Protože tahle má.
The current in the channel below the power station flows quickly and with some turbulence. Stonefly nymphs and some sedge species like these waters, which is why both Milan and František use imitations of wild sedge larvae. They use 3 different flies at the same time to give the fish more choice. František casts an extremely short line, almost just using the leader to fish with. The flies are cast using a swinging, lobbing movement diagonally upstream. The high speed of the current drives the flies downstream, so a new cast is needed. Both Milan and František fish all possible lies carefully and systematically, with several casts aimed at the same place.
Oh,
This gives even the most reticent trout a chance to take the fly, even if they hesitate at some of the first drifts. Because the flies are always drifting with the current, it's difficult to feel in the line or rod when the fish takes. Instead, the sudden movement of the leader indicates a bite. This is why both Milan and František constantly watch the leader, as the slightest tremble could mean a take. They always use polarized sunglasses to avoid being dazzled by the light reflected from the surface of the water. As a bite can often be very difficult to detect, František prefers to strike quite often rather than hesitate. Further downstream, the river widens and splits into a lot of small streams, which sometimes join up again as deeper pools or pockets where the fish like to stay. This is a real challenge for the method, even for such skilled fishermen as Milan and František. The still, unbroken surface of the pools makes the fish shy and easily frightened. You really need to creep up carefully and fish the pools in the correct order.
Small brownie.
In contradiction of all we've learnt, Milan and František wade over one of the deeper pools in this stretch to get to the other side. After having carefully fished the edge of the current on the other side, they return to fish the pool again, but from the other direction. We're surprised to see that the fish have stayed put, despite our wading this way and that. The lesson to be learned from this demonstration of the short line method is that we often fish too far out. If the surface is broken and deep, the fish can be waiting just under the tip of the rod. Both Vladimir Sedivy and Vít Mísa have been members of the Czech national team. Vladimir's greatest success to date was becoming the individual world champion in Sweden in 2001. Today we're fishing further downstream than yesterday. The Vltava is much wider and similar to the waters we're used to in southern Sweden. Vladimir and Vít are going to show us how the Czech nymph method can be used for longer distances, the medium distance method. Vladimir uses a somewhat longer leader than Milan and František used to demonstrate the short distance method. He's also tied in 20 centimetres of a bright orange nylon line between the leader and the fly line, so that he can more easily see takes further out in the river. His tackle consists of 3 different flies, with the heaviest at the bottom, so that the flies are presented in a straight line. Vít and Vladimir use both traditional Czech nymphs as well as the more modern jig nymphs. Vladimir decides to fish the edge of the current out to the river's deeper central channel. Every possible lie is fished with several drifts. The arm is held straight out at shoulder height to make it easier to steer the flies in the water. In contrast to the short distance method, several metres of fly line are used. The flies are cast diagonally upstream and then fished while drifting freely. But they don't just fish while the flies drift freely. Sometimes they extend the drift downstream. Keep the rod arm directed at the flies all the time by turning your body at the same speed as the flies travel downstream. When the drift has ended and the line is taut, they continue to fish, but in the traditional downstream wet fly style. By constantly changing the way the flies are presented, a large area is covered effectively with every cast. Note especially how the leader is kept taut over the surface of the water. The take is indicated when the leader's coloured butt suddenly moves. But it's quite common for Czech nymph fishermen to place a loop of the leader butt on the surface, so that a take is indicated when it sinks. This method works almost as well, but the leader makes no distinction between a genuine take and snagging the bottom. It sinks in both cases. The method used by Vladimir and Vít is much better, and there's a clear difference between a real take and snagging the bottom. It's an impressive sight to see how Vít and Vladimir so skillfully manage to steer the nymphs in the current, while keeping all of the leader and the fly line taut over the surface without the flies starting to drag. And they catch fish almost all the time, evidence that they are masters of this method. During the afternoon, we pay a visit to one of the Vltava's tributaries, today coloured brown because of the heavy rain. The fish here are mainly grayling, trout and whitefish. Even some other species such as roach and chub are prized, in contrast to many other countries. To avoid scaring the fish, Vít and Vladimir kneel down when fishing. It's quite unusual to see fishermen kneeling in the river, but this is a really good way to get close to easily scared fish in shallow waters. The fish aren't big and the takes are very cautious. That's why Vít and Vladimir follow the leader very carefully and strike every time the leader moves. Vladimir fishes the shallow water above the pool. Note that no fly line is used at all with this method. It's just the long leader beyond the tip of the rod that's used for fishing. Vladimir's tied in a short piece of coloured line, a metre or so above the first fly. This will serve as a very sensitive strike indicator. Karol calls this a Czech variation of French nymphing, and it's used when there are shy fish in clear, shallow waters. We would, of course, look for fish first in the deeper holes, but Vladimir chooses to fish the fastest and shallowest areas of the pool instead. But if you look carefully at the current, you can see more lies behind the fist-sized stones than in the holes along the bottom. Having watched Vladimir and Vít carefully for a day, a clear picture emerges of two very determined fishermen who leave nothing to chance. Every cast and every presentation is given the 100% concentration it deserves.
Grayling. Double.
Another day's fishing, and this time we meet Martin Susel, the current coach for the Czech national team, who's just returned from the World Championships in New Zealand. He tells us with happiness and pride that the Czech team has just won its 6th gold medal. As team coach, he's expected to have both theoretical knowledge and practical skills at the very highest levels. Martin is recognised as an extremely skillful nymph fisherman, and he's promised to show us how to use the Czech nymph method in narrow and shallow waters. He's chosen a stretch high up the Vltava, which is very shallow and narrow. There's less fishing going on here than further down the river, but the sun is high and the low water level makes fishing especially difficult. Martin points out that under these conditions, it's wise to look for fish in the shadier parts of the river and in the more turbulent, oxygen-rich waters. Martin is a real master and uses 2 or 3 weight rods. The leader's about 12 foot long, with a tip of 0.08 to 0.12 millimetre thin fluorocarbon line. The flies are also very small, not like the large bushy Czech nymphs we've seen earlier. At first, the fishing's slow, and not even Martin has any great success with his method. After fishing a while, we're joined by a party of canoeists, and something quite strange happens. Just as the canoeists glide by, the fish start to take.
Unbelievable.
Martin catches several fish, and can now demonstrate how his well-polished variation of Czech nymphing works.
Nice brown. Small brown.
As the water level is so low, most of the fish are gathered at the most promising lies in the river. Martin fishes these stretches with extra care, using repeated drifts to tempt the fish, in the end, to take the flies.
Yeah, nice grilling.
Hi Martin.
Hi, Johan.
Does it go? Have you catch anything?
Yeah,
Yeah.
some grilling and some brownie. Not so big, but one grilling was really good. Good size, about 36, 37 centimeters.
Great.
Cockfish,
Very nice.
yeah,
Very nice. Yes.
with nice body, with nice color.
Yeah. What
Good.
fly did you caught now?
Yeah, today I'm using a really small pattern on jig hooks with tungsten bead.
Yes.
On the point I've got silver head with black body.
This one is a lot smaller than that one I use.
Yeah, yeah, because the water is really down. It's really shallow today. In summer, it's not a lot of water. Yeah, and you must use a small pattern for graying fishing this part of here.
All right.
You know.
So you started with this thing, or?
No. I start with heavier fly, but I've caught nothing.
No.
Yeah, it was too heavy, and I touched too much on the bottom, and I changed it. And I have got about 4 or 5 touch from the fish, but not strike any, because I start with a little bit stronger nylon, 0.13. I think it could be about 7x, maybe.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, 7x.
Yeah.
And when I changed the leader, and now I'm using the thinner nylon, 0.10 millimeters.
Yeah.
And from this time I've caught about 8 fish.
Yeah. That's very thin. That's very thin leader.
Yeah.
So what's your opinion about thin leaders? Is it necessary when Czech nymphing, or is it?
Yeah. And when you're fishing the nature fish, here are just nature grayling and brownies.
Yes.
And I think our fishermen are really clever, and fish are also clever because there are a lot of hook.
Yes.
So
Yes.
hooks, and in competition, or in normal fishing, we are using really thin nylon.
Those patterns, they're really nice.
Yeah.
So if I'm gonna fish now, you fish close to the shore side at the shadows, or
Yeah, on the bank, by the bank, are staying mostly brownies.
Yeah.
But grilling are in the faster water.
All right.
Now in the summer, because they are find the faster water for oxygen. Yeah, because in the autumn they are staying in the slowly water, but now they are in shallow water and fast water.
Oh, that's great. So if you will point a position for me to try for grayling, would that be somewhere in between the stones there?
Yeah, it could be. For dry fly, it's better
All
a
right.
little bit slowly water.
All right.
They are rising very nice on the last part of stream.
Yeah.
But for nymphing, it's better to fish in fast water.
But I don't have any of those nymphs.
Yeah, no problem.
You have one for me, great.
Okay. For example, this one.
Yeah.
This is the fly.
Oh, great. Oh, that's a small little silverhead.
Yeah.
So I try that position there with a little nymph though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you try it.
We go for it.
During the afternoon, it's time to try our luck in another river. This river has a completely different character, and the faster moving stretches yield a lot of grayling. Martin starts off by fishing the quieter flowing pools, but the fish refuse to take in spite of lots of casts and drifts. Martin changes to smaller flies to see if it will help. Martin decides on a new strategy and starts to fish the much shallower stretch just upstream. We're surprised to see that there are feeding fish here. The reason is that the fish have left the warm pools for the more turbulent but oxygenated waters. The grayling in the Czech Republic are much smaller than we're used to in Scandinavia, but this phenomenon has a natural explanation. As graylings spawn, a number of small cuts are made on the body. As the water here is quite warm during the spawning season, these cuts are more easily infected, so grayling never get to be more than 3 to 4 years old, and just don't get a chance to grow larger before they die.
Small grayling.
Milan Janus is one of the real pioneers of Czech nymphing. He's played an important part in developing the modern Czech nymph method. We're going to meet Milan and his friend David Voldrich on the Otava River. In contrast to the other rivers we've fished during the past few days, this is much bigger. Milan, whose nymphing skills are renowned far beyond the borders of the Czech Republic, has promised to show us how the long-distance method works. Milan uses a leader which is about 20 feet long. The first 15 feet are in a bright orange-yellow colour for easy visibility. Milan casts the flies diagonally upstream, about 15 metres out. When the flies have landed, he mends upstream, so that the furthest part of the line lies in a loop, the shape of a hook. At the end of the leader, he has a weighted nymph and an unweighted wet fly as a dropper. While the flies are upstream, they drift and sink slowly closer to the bottom. At this point, the flies are meant to imitate free-drifting insect larvae, but should also be allowed to sink deep enough. When the flies have drifted a few metres below Milan's position, the line is stretched by slowly raising the top of the rod. The flies start to drag against the current and rise slowly towards the surface, just like a hatching nymph or sedge pupa. Similar methods have been used by other well-known nymphers in the past. The Lazenring lift and Frank Sawyer's induced take are among the most famous. Even David uses the long-distance method, but instead of looking at the leader when the fish takes, he uses a dry fly as a strike indicator. In the bend of the dry fly hook, he hangs a half-metre tippet with a small nymph on the end. By using this leader construction, the fish can take the fly both on and under the surface of the water. This method is sometimes very effective, and has been widely used for a long time in the USA and Europe. It's time to leave the Czech Republic for now, but we're full of inspiration and discoveries, and the training provided by the grandmasters of modern nymph fishing. But before we leave, Karol has promised to tell us how Czech nymph fishing began.
I can show you that historical.
Oh, that will be lovely.
Historical
you have them there?
patterns.
Yeah. All right. That's great.
That is that original Polish
Okay.
hydropsyche.
So this is the fly from 1984
Yes,
with the back and yes.
peacock's back.
Yes.
This one is the first Czech
Okay.
pattern.
Yes. And what's interesting is that I can see the back here, and that's something typical for the Czech nymph, I
Yeah,
guess. Yes. And this was 1987.
1987, 17 September. We know that the date.
Yeah.
It is original fly.
Yeah. The Janus original.
Yeah,
Gammarus.
yeah. And next was that fly. It's a little bear.
The little bear. Yeah.
Very secret and very fatty.
Very
fly.
fast, very heavy fly. The back, what is made of?
It is from catfish skin.
Wow. Catfish skin.
Next model,
Yeah.
original, was that
Wow.
Bobesh. It's very famous fly. We win for that fly
Yeah.
in 1991, 1990 in Wales.
In Wales.
In
all right.
Wales.
And this is for me very much of a Czech nymph.
Yeah,
with the back.
It's the first original Czech nymph.
So, Karol, what is the difference from today's Czech nymph style compared to how it was 1984?
In past we are using rods size 5
Yes.
and nylons 0.18, 0.16.
Yeah.
And nowadays we are using very fine nylons,
Yeah.
fluorocarbons, and very soft rods size 2, size 3. That's why if we fish in hard condition,
Yeah.
we have to fish with very thin
Yeah.
nylon
Very
and
thin
soft
nylon.
rod.
How thin are the nylon?
It is 0.10,
Oh my.
0.12,
That's
but
very
sometimes 0.08.
Oh my God, that's very thin. But Karol, one last question. How did the Czech nymph style once start?
Yes, it is 25-year-old history. Our team was in Poland for one fly fishing event,
Okay.
and the first people of our country saw that style, that short style. That's why the Polish competitors didn't have fly lines,
All right.
and then are using the thick nylon.
Instead of a fly line.
Yeah.
All right.
And next year on national championships, Czechoslovakian,
Yeah.
compete the first people that style, and 1996 won Slavoj Svoboda World Championships in Belgium with that style.
Oh, that's great. It has been a great pleasure to meet you, Karol. I have learned so much. And I still have another couple of hours to fish together with you. So I think we should continue to fish the stream,
Yeah,
upstream here.
try it.
Till the evening.
That stream and that pool is very good for grayling.
At Baltak on the Tiden River, just outside Tidaholm, fly fishermen from all over southern Sweden are gathered to try their luck at catching trout and rainbow trout. The Czech nymph method was introduced on the Tidam as early as the end of the 1980s, and since then has steadily won new disciples. Baltak is well known primarily for the fighting spirit of its rainbow trout, but you also have a good chance of catching wild trout. This area has been managed by the Herkensals Sports Fishing Company since the 1970s, and many famous fishermen have visited here, Niels Fernström and Milan Janus to name but two. For many years, the Czech nymph method was mainly associated with grayling fishing. This was because trout were frightened when you came so close using the traditional short distance method. Grayling didn't swim off and could be easily caught using short casts and drifts. For trout, you should use the short distance method in fast moving turbulent waters where the fish aren't disturbed by wading. At Baltac, there are lots of fast moving stretches where the short distance method works well. Zone 1 is a very popular beat where the Czech nymph method is often used. In the current in front of the bridge, we'll see if the traditional short distance method, which Martin, Milan and František showed us, also works on the Týdan.
It was actually in this pool as I and my friends started to practice Czech nymphing style for about 20 years ago, and it was the same original Czech style as we have seen Karol and his friend practice in the Czech Republic. So let's have a closer look how this technique really works.
At the start and finish of the drift, the tip of the rod should be in its lowest position, closest to the water. As the flies drift with the current towards the fisherman, he raises the tip of the rod at the same speed, keeping the line taut during the entire drift. When the flies are level with the fisherman, the tip of the rod is raised to its highest point. As the flies continue to drift downstream, he releases the line at the same speed as the flies flow with the current.
A good advice is to always make a strike as soon as you see that the leader butt moves, because you never know. It might be bottom, but very often it might be a good fish too. Czech nymph. Catch and release. When fishing with 3 flies on the leader at the same time, it is very easy to have a tangle. So to avoid this, the Czech nymphers use a special casting technique. After the drift and the flies start to rise towards the surface, cast them upstream with one single cast, like this. Oh!
One stretch of Zone 1 splits into two streams, one running behind the islands. The two streams rejoin and form a small, well-defined deep pool. All the insects drifting down the river gather here, making it a perfect lie, both protecting the fish and serving up food in abundance for little effort. The fish can lie anywhere in the pool, so it's important to fish all the possible lies carefully and systematically. To avoid scaring the fish, we start at the lies furthest downstream in the pool and work our way upstream. And just as we saw in the Czech Republic, the fish often lie close to the inlet to the pool. The short distance method uses only a limited part of the fly line or even just the leader. The flies are swung straight out or 4 to 6 meters diagonally upstream from the fisherman. Make sure you keep the line straight and taut between the flies and the tip of the rod. A take is indicated when the lead is stretched with a quick jerk. The leader construction used is the same as Martin showed us in the Czech Republic, but with a heavier fly at the end and two lighter flies as droppers. A suitable total length for the leader is between 10 and 12 feet. In Tidan, where the fish can sometimes be really big, a leader thickness of between 0.14 and 0.18 millimeters is recommended. We've moved a couple of kilometres downstream to the popular Ruin pool to try out the middle distance method that Vladimir and Vít showed us in the Czech Republic.
When fishing an even and a wider stream, it can be good to present the flies a bit further out than you do with the original style. Therefore, with the medium distance technique, we use 4 to 5 meters of fly line instead. Another difference is that we fish in another angle as well. Great advantage with this technique is that we fairly easy can cover a large piece of water quite quickly.
Using the middle distance method, the flies are cast 6 to 8 meters upstream from the fisherman's position. When the flies hit the water, the line and leader are raised to make a straight line between the tip of the rod and the flies. Remember to follow the drift of the flies with the tip of the rod, otherwise there's a risk that the flies will start to drag against the current. Before we cast the flies, let's look in detail at what we do. Start by stretching the line so that the flies are hanging, dragging and just under the surface. The tip of the rod should be held low over the surface in the same direction as the flies. Cast the flies using a large sweeping vertical rod movement in the direction where you want the flies to land. If your rod movement is too restricted, then the arc of the line can be too tight, increasing the risk of tangling the flies in the fly line.
Normally, this would be the end of the drift, but by handing over the rod to the other hand, we can increase the drift with another 1.5 meters.
The still water surface by the riverbank may mean that there's a deep edge here. In order to fish these lies, place the flies exactly on the junction between the quieter and faster waters using repeated drifts. Even though the flies are placed at about the same spot with every cast, the drifts will be different because of the changes in the currents. If it's difficult to keep the line and leader in a straight line over such a long distance, making a small loop on the surface with the leader butt works almost as well. When the fish take, the loop straightens out. To keep the line floating and visible on the surface, it's a good idea to impregnate the end of the line and the leader butt with floating paste. You must be able to read the signs on the surface to know where the fish are in turbulent waters. The fish prefer to shelter from the currents and rest, but like to go hunting in the faster waters, as these bring both drifting nymphs and larvae.
Oj, oj.
Even if you can't see all the stones, their positions are revealed by the quiet waters on the surface. It's a good idea to place the fly just upstream of the quiet spot and then steer the fly so it passes the junction between the quieter and rougher waters. Milan Janus showed us how he used the Czech nymph method even over longer distances. If this method is going to work well, then it's important that the current is even and doesn't split into different streams going in different directions. That's why we've moved downstream below Ruin Pool, where there are some long, quiet stretches. Milan used a combination of a heavier nymph and an unweighted wet fly, but you can be successful with the traditional Czech nymph leader construction using 3 nymphs.
When fishing is slow and a wide stream like this one, it can sometimes be very good to present our flies a bit further out. Therefore, I will practice the long distance technique, the same technique we saw Milan Janus practice when we were in the Czech Republic. And this technique is perfect to use when we would like to present our flies free drifting up to 15 meters away. And I know it's a couple of very good trouts on the shadow line towards the tree line on the other side, and I will try to catch them with this technique now.
If distances are over 10 meters, then use the long distance method. Cast the flies diagonally upstream from the fisherman. When the flies hit the surface, mend the line upstream to make a loop in the end of the line just behind the leader. A take is indicated when the loop suddenly stops or straightens out. As the flies drift downstream, it's important to mend the line upstream regularly. When the flies are level with the fisherman and drifting downstream, the line between the leader and the tip of the rod must be mended upstream, so the fly line is always behind the flies during the drift. Otherwise, the current might take the fly line and pull the flies out of their desired drift line. At the end of the drift, the rod is raised so that the line is taut and the flies rise up to the surface. The flies can be cast using a traditional overhand movement, or, as here, with an underhand cast. It's always best to first let the line stretch downstream and then make the cast. You can then cast the flies using just one forward cast. Remember that every time you cast the flies through the air, there's a chance that they can get entangled.
When fishing on this distance up to 15 meters away, it can be very hard to see the thin fly line tip. Therefore, it can sometimes be very handy to use a little strike indicator. And this model, as I have here, is very easy to use. What I do is that I applicate it directly on the leader butt, about 20 centimeters below the fly line tip. And this orange ball will be a lot easier to see out there than this thin fly line tip.
The usual Czech nymph leader construction with 1 or 2 droppers is the most common equipment used for this type of fishing. Patrick Johansson, one of the pioneers in Swedish Czech nymph fishing, has a very different solution.
Any luck?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Christ. Very good. It's a decent fish, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
I think he took the bottom fly, didn't
Yeah.
he? Oh. Oh, look at that. That's a big
fish.
Wow.
Let's release him.
Good.
That was a good fish.
That was a very good fish.
Thank
He
you.
took the last fly, I think.
Yeah.
The little nymph.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the tackle you normally use, isn't it?
Yeah, when I don't want any tangles,
I see.
I tie them in the hook bend instead of using normal droppers.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Nice fish, Patrick.
It was a nice fish.
I think I would like to try this spot a bit further downstream.
Yeah.
Wouldn't
Here's
I?
your nets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, whoa, whoa. The Czech nymph method rarely calls for a long advanced cast, but in spite of this, a lot of demands are made on the tackle if the fishing is to be successful.
Now a little bit about the fishing tackle we use for this method. Since we rarely cast in the distance when practicing the Czech nymph method, the fly rod's casting qualities are of less importance. But still, there are some fishing qualities to ask for. The rod have to be strong enough to lift the heavy nymphs from the bottom, but still be soft enough to not snap off a light leader when making a strike. The length can be between 7 and 10 feet, depending on what size of water we fish. The fly reel's main function is to keep the fly line on the spool, but it's still well worth thinking about having a smooth break. Otherwise, a very thin leader will snap off when you're fighting a fish. The fly line must have very good floating qualities, because if the tips start to sink, it will bring under the leader butt as well, and we will have very hard to see a strike.
To see how the Czech nymph method works when fishing for grayling in bigger rivers, we've travelled to Norway. Our destination is Femundsmarka, with such classic waters as Sørma, Gløta, Isterforsen and Trysilelven, here known as the Femund River. After the Second World War, the fishing here was fantastic, and it attracted fishermen from far and wide. But the decades of hard exploitation seriously affected the fish stocks. During the last few years, intensive work has been going on to improve the fishing. Special fly fishing zones have been designated, and a lot of work has been carried out to improve the biotope. Furthermore, restrictions on catches and an increase in the minimum sizes for grayling and trout caught are being enforced. These measures have allowed the fish to increase in both numbers and average weight throughout the area. Our guide, Jan Terje Oos, grew up by the rivers and has been fishing here since childhood. Apart from his hunting and tackle shop, he works with sports fishing tourism in the district. We've agreed to meet Jan Terje at one of his favourite spots, where the river is wide and shallow, and fast frothing rapids are mixed with slower pools.
Hi, Jan Terje.
Hi, Ivan. Welcome to Norway and the Famines River.
Great to be here. The river looks fantastic. So, what kind of fish do you have here in the river?
Mostly grayling, but also some trout.
Great. So, how is the chances? Is there any chance to catch a big one?
Yeah, you should have the.
Yeah?
You should have a good chance.
Have you been here long?
For a couple of hours.
Any catch?
Some.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good. It's just been a very long trip from Sweden over to here, and I'm very, very curious about this water.
Yeah, just go ahead and try.
All right. I'm very curious.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Jan Terje thinks the fishing will be good, even though we're already in September. He suggests that we move upstream so that we can fish together. This is where the river's main stream presses against one bank and forms classic grayling waters. The grayling can be spread out all over the pool, from the deep central channel and all the way to both banks. We decide to use the medium distance method so that we can reach the lies further out in the river. It's always interesting to see how methods and patterns will work in untried waters. You never know what the circumstances will be. In no time at all, we get the first take. The leader jerks and indicates that a grayling has taken one of the 3 flies on the leader. The fish is about 35 centimetres long and just under the normal size for this river, according to Jan Terje. The method works well, and the stretch's even speed makes it easy to present the flies drifting freely along the bottom. All the grayling have taken the heavier end fly, which is an imitation of a Hydrosychia larva. This shows that the grayling is a typical bottom fish, often lying deep, preferably sheltered from the current behind a stone or in a hole to save energy. Even though Jan Terje hasn't tried this method previously, he soon picks it up.
Där ja, bra! Härligt!
Jan Terje has caught lots of grayling just by the edge of this stream. A lot of small streams run in from the nearby rapids and carry with them drifting larvae and nymphs that had lost their hold in the swift-flowing waters beyond. There are plenty of larvae here, both the sedge and the oxygen-hungry mayfly nymphs of the Heptagenia variety. The smaller streams serve up food in a concentrated flow, so the fish don't need to move to reach it. If the inlets aren't too shallow, then this is a perfect lie for both grayling and trout. But you have to move carefully, otherwise you might scare the fish in this shallow water. Clumsy, quick and careless movements are a very common reason for the absence of success. It's been a really good day's fishing, and both the short and middle distance methods worked well. But how will this method work in the evening, as the sedge hatch and the grayling focus their attention on the rising sedge pupae? Jan Terje takes us to a stretch further downstream. The currents are much fiercer and there aren't any big deep pools. But on one stretch, near land, the current calms down. And it's in this junction between the faster and slower water that we'll look for our grayling, which often lie in the slower waters while hunting in the faster waters beyond. Quite soon, we see the first female sedge swarming over the surface of the water. And soon after, the first of the newly hatched sedges are swimming to land. A lot of sedge species hatch their pupae drifting on the surface. When they leave the bottom and rise to the surface, they're a simple catch for the fish, something the grayling in Femund's River knows very well. To start with, we fish the edges of the currents with the short distance method, which lets you present the flies exactly along the clearly marked edge. The rising sedge pupae will soon get the fishing going properly. At first, the fish take the end fly, as it's presented deep down near the bottom. But as the number of hatched sedge pupae increases, the grayling more often choose some of the flies on the droppers higher up the leader. The sedge pupae move straight up or diagonally across the current, so a dragging fly is a better imitation of a sedge pupa than a drifting fly. So it's more effective to keep the fly in the current a little longer before making a new cast. It's here the Czech nymph method shows one of its many advantages. By first letting the flies sink towards the bottom and then giving them a rising movement towards the end of the drift, you provide a very natural imitation of the hatched sedge pupae. Flies with a silver or gold head have worked best during the evening. The glimmer of the metallic heads almost imitates the gas-filled bodies of the sedge pupae, which allows them to rise more quickly to the surface for hatching. This was the thinking behind the work of Theo Baclier, the Dutch fly tyer, who was first to put gold heads on his flies. The evening gave us a lot of good grayling in various sizes, and almost all of them were taken on an imitation of a rising sedge pupa. Today, together with the fisheries bailiff Jan Nordvolen, we're going to explore the outlet of Galt Lake, where the Femund River starts its course. Galthudet, as the place is known, is classic water, which has long been a favourite of fly fishermen. A special fly fishing zone has been allocated from the outlet and a good bit downstream. Jan tells us that a lot of really big grayling have been caught here over the years, and catches over 1 kilo are common. We decide to move downstream to the lower stretch of the fly fishing zone, and then fish our way back up to the lake using upstream fishing techniques. The river's very different here, and the currents in the main channel are fast and heavy, while along the edges of the channel you can see several smaller but clearly visible lies to fish. The mayfly nymph imitation, together with a couple of sedge larvae, can stay on the leader. This combination covers a large part of a grayling's menu in these waters, The main channel is fished first, using the long distance method. The first take comes at once, and a smaller grayling has taken the middle fly, a jig nymph. The next grayling takes the nymph at the edge of the main channel as well. The mayfly nymphs are moving, and the grayling are definitely starting to eat them. The flies don't often drift very far before the nymph is taken. A sure sign the grayling are choosing to take the nymphs on their way up to the surface. Near the edge, the stream is still deep, but much slower than out in the main channel. A lot of the drifting mayfly nymphs get gathered up here, and if there's enough, then the fish here will start to feed. Because the flies need to be presented using short drifts along the edge of the main channel, it's important that they sink quickly to the right level. Otherwise, the flies will be presented above the fish, and that isn't as effective. So we change the tippet for a thinner dimension and change the end fly for a heavier imitation. The thinner tippet presents a smaller surface to the current and cuts through the water better than a thicker one. The take is careful, hardly noticeable, but the fish feels strong and heavy in the current. The grayling lifts his large back fin to brace himself against the current and offers a real fight where the result isn't at all a foregone conclusion. This grayling also took the jig nymph, which seems to be the fly of the day. The pockets along the edge of the current are fished systematically using the middle distance method and a fast sinking end fly, together with 2 mayfly nymphs as droppers. The combination is a success, with a new grayling taking at every new place we try. It's easy to forget the old rule. Always start by fishing the spots closest to land, before wading out to fish in deeper waters. Here, close to the edge, is the deepest part of this stretch of the river, so you can assume that there are grayling there. But to avoid scaring the fish in the shallow water, you can choose to start fishing from the middle of the river into the bank.
The river behind me is quite deep and the fish standing very close towards the bottom, and the traditional Czech style tackle would do just fine there, but I will go over and try a little bit further upstream where the water is a lot shallower and the fish are extremely shy. Add the bright sun as well, and you will have a really tricky situation. So I will try with the French style tackle instead, together with 2 little nymphs. We'll see if that will do instead.
You notice the take when the coloured line in the middle of the leader jerks. It can be hard at first to see the difference between what's really a take and what's a snag. But after you've landed a couple of fish, you won't be mistaken. The take shows itself in an obvious, quick movement which is clearly visible. The fishing in Femund's Marker and the Femund River has been quite fantastic, and the Czech nymph method works just as well here as in the Czech Republic and Sweden.
The Czech nymphing technique is a great technique to do well in all kind of rivers and streams all over the world, both grayling and brown trout. And it's one of my favorite techniques, as I really enjoy to practice whenever I can. So it's time for me and Bo to go home.
There are lots of interesting and exciting techniques to be tried out when fly fishing, some more difficult to learn than others. Everyone can learn the Czech nymph method, and you've seen it used successfully in Norway, Sweden and the Czech Republic. Now it's up to you to try the method and adapt it for your own home waters. Good luck!
On the end on fly line,
Yes.
we are using some indicator, strike indicator,
All right.
in some color, orange, green.
Something
Hello.
visible,
Yes.
highly visible.
Normal nylon.
Normal line,
Normal
because I
nylon.
have seen those of Dacron and things like that, but you prefer nylon.
Nylon,
All right.
just nylon.
Oh, good.
We are using on the end of the strike indicator micro ring.
All right.
Yeah. It's better for change leader
Okay.
or wet fly or dry fly. When you broke some fly, you
Mhm.
make change very quick new leader.
So if I want to change from nymphing over to ordinary dry fly
Yeah.
fishing, I just cut off my nymph
Yes.
leader and change it to dry fly leader instead.
Oh,
Right
normal
there.
better. When I
Yeah.
want to change the leader for dry fly,
Yeah.
I am using the taper leader.
Yes.
Yeah,
All right.
and I take off all leader for
Hmm.
nymphing, because the leader for nymphing we have in the same diameter in all.
All right.
In all
the
lengths,
whole way.
you
The
know.
whole way. So you don't ever use any tapered leaders for the nymph
For the
fishing
nymphing,
instead?
no,
Oh,
no,
good.
no.
Interesting.
For nymphs, all lengths is in the same size, and the diameter of the nylon which we are using for leader
Yes.
is about the river. When we fish in the big river, bigger fish, we are using 016, 015,
Yes.
014.
Yeah.
When we fish in shallow water and small fish, 012, 010.
Oh, 10.
So
That's very
010.
very thin.
for
Yes.
competition,
Yeah.
is sometimes it's possible to use 009,
Oh, my
008.
God. Oh, that's very
Yes. But it's really fine.
Very
It's
rare.
not good for normal
No.
fishing because
No.
you can lose a lot of flies.
Lot of flies. All right.
Yeah. Okay, I can show you how we make the basic leader for nymphing.
All right. The
When
basic,
when we fish with three flies,
yes.
the minimum length for the top dropper is about 50-60 centimeters
All right.
under my kerning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then to the middle dropper
Yeah.
is again 50-60 and
Okay.
again 50 or 60 centimeters to the point.
Great.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can show you how to make it.
Great. I would love to see it.
Okay. When I want to make the leader, I take all lengths for the leader
Yeah.
from the spool.
All right.
Yeah. I need, for example, I need the top dropper about 60 centimeters under top dropper. It's
Okay.
like this.
Yes.
Yeah. And I know that here will be top dropper.
Yes.
This is dropper
Yes. And then you add.
to the middle dropper,
Oh, okay.
again 60.
Yes.
Dropper
Uh-huh.
and on the point.
And the point.
Okay.
All right.
I cut it.
Mm-hmm.
And now to the micro rings.
You fix this.
Normal knot.
Yeah.
I don't know
blood
how
knot.
to
blood
call
nuts.
it in.
Blood nuts.
Yeah, blood knot.
Yes.
When I need the top dropper,
Yes.
for example here,
Yes.
about 60 centimeters under the micro rings,
Mm-hmm.
I take this place,
Yes.
take the end of the prepared nylon,
Uh-huh.
take it.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 nylons here
Yeah.
and loop
Mm-hmm.
and 1,
Mm-hmm.
2 times
Uh-huh.
around
Yes.
and through the
All
eye,
right. Okay.
through the loop, and slowly,
Pull it together.
yeah. And now I cut this one.
Yes. Now
And
you
I-
have a
Yes.
like a loop
You have
down here.
You have
Yeah.
big loop.
All right.
And
yes.
now I need dropper.
Okay.
Doesn't matter which one it will be.
It's
Yeah.
the same strength anyway.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the same nylon.
Yeah.
For example, this one,
Okay.
dropper 15 centimeters.
All
Yeah.
right.
And now
Yeah.
I cut it
Yeah.
and its dropper is prepared.
Perfect.
And
Perfect.
now I need middle dropper,
Uh-huh.
again 60 centimeters.
60 centimeters.
Yeah. The same place, take back the end. Again, loop,
Yeah. Around the
1,
loop. 2. And the
to the loop,
through.
and again, slowly. Cut it. And the same, I make dropper. That's all.
So what I see here now is that the knot is in the same direction as the leader.
Yeah.
So it follows the leader, which is very, very good. And what happens though if you is it a big chance that you lose the whole tackle if you pull this dropper?
Yeah.
Will it
Yeah.
break off here,
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
thing, or
This knot is best for things when you broke the fly
Yes.
for fish or for on the bottom.
yeah?
Every time you lost just one fly.
So it breaks here.
Yes.
All
yes.
right. So you don't lose the
No.
fly underneath.
When you will be make some different leader.
Yeah.
For example, you broke the fish on the top dropper.
Yes, yes.
You lost all 3
Yes,
flies.
I know that. I know that.
But with this knots,
Yes.
90% you lose just one fly.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good, very good. So this is the ordinary tackle,
Yeah.
the main tackle for the Czech Nymphing
Yes,
style.
yes.
So this is the tackle as the world championship, world
sure,
champion use.
sure.
All right, that's
Sure,
interesting.
sure.
So how do you get on with the flies here though? Where do you put them? Do you put
Yeah.
the heaviest fly here in the middle, as we always have heard so often that the Czechs always have the heaviest fly in the middle.
No.
That's
no.
not true.
No.
That's it. Okay.
No. Heaviest fly,
Yeah.
basic, is ordinary is to use on the point.
On the point.
Is best for presentation.
All right.
Just sometimes when the water is not so deep and is more shallow,
Yeah.
we use the heaviest fly on the middle dropper and the point are in the water like the wet fly.
Like a wet
Yeah.
fly. So the,
Yeah.
so the heavy
But
fly
for
and the wet fly
yes,
hangs like this.
yes.
All right.
But
Yeah.
for presentation, original Czech Nymphing
Yes.
is heaviest fly on the point.
bottom, on the point.
Yeah.
So what flies would you use for this though?
Yeah. On the point, normally
Yeah.
we are using flies with some head,
Yes.
with bead, yeah, you know.
Bedheads.
Yeah,
All right.
bedheads, yeah.
Yes. And always tungstone.
It's again about the
Yeah.
deep, about
Yeah.
the water, but or mostly of
Mostly
time, most of
tungsten.
time.
Tungsten.
When the water is shallow, I'm using smaller tungsten bead,
Yeah.
and the flies could be very thin because you must not use any lead. Just
Right.
yeah.
Wow.
For example, this pattern you see,
Yes.
the body is very thin,
Yes.
black body.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Oh, that's
copperhead
nice.
is I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
2.5 millimeter,
Mm.
and it's good for 1 meter water.
1 meter water. All
No
right.
problem.
Okay.
Yeah, with Czech Nymphing.
What I see here as well, which is very interesting, that's the
Yeah.
hook shape. You have the hook
Yeah.
eye pointing upwards
Yeah.
like
This
a
is
jig.
jig hook.
Jig
Yeah,
hook.
jig hook.
So
Yeah.
why is that?
Why?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you are fishing with jig hook on the point,
Yeah.
the fly
Yeah.
is going on the bottom on the back. Yeah.
Only, yeah, right.
It's
How
the same.
clever.
It's
Yeah.
the same because the fly
Yeah.
are not different from this side or this side.
All right.
But,
But.
on the bottom,
Yeah.
you cannot strike the bottom.
No.
Stones, trees,
Yeah. No.
everything on the bottom.
Do you use those jig hooks on the droppers as well, or is it like the idea is to use them on the
Not
on the point?
plenty of time.
No.
On the point,
Yeah.
and sometimes
Yeah.
when I fish just in shallow water with
Yeah.
2 flies,
Yes.
for the same thing I'm using 2 jig hooks,
All
2
right.
small jigs.
Yes.
Yeah, but in the bigger deep water, we are using the jig hook on the point,
Yeah.
and then our Czech nymph shrimp
Yeah.
or on the straight hook normal.
So this is the Czech nymphs
Yeah,
you
this
use.
is
Typical
Czech
Czech nymphs.
nymph.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gosh, there's a lot of flies you have in there. All right. I think I have to go up and set my new tackle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Catch you later.
See you again.
My nymph box is absolutely full of different nymphs, tied in different colors, different weights and different patterns. But even for this I have 3 favorite flies, and normally I have at least one of them on my team while I'm Czech nymphing. And the first one is a little imitation of a green Cadislava tied with olive floss silk. Very nice little pattern. The second fly is a cased caddis imitation, tied and developed by the Tidan fisherman Björn Blomqvist. And if you like to, you can add a tungstone head to this fly if you like to have this fly to sink a bit faster. The third fly among those favorite flies is the latest, and this fly is tied with a jig hook, which makes the fly to go upside down and prevent the fly to get stuck in the bottom. This pattern can be tied in different colors as well, so it can be tied with a gold head or even a silver head if you prefer. But my favorite is this with tied with a copper head and a brownish body. But let's start with the green Cadislava.
Give the fly some weight by covering most of the shank with closely wound fine lead wire, as far as the bend in the hook. The lead wire must be closely wound so that no gaps appear. Carefully wind on a further layer of lead wire, making sure it doesn't cut into the layer below. Fasten the tying thread in front of the weight and make a smooth underbody by covering the lead wire with even turns of tying thread. In the middle of the bend in the hook, fasten a 10 cm length of soft gold-coloured wire. Cut a strip of nymph skin about 3 to 4 millimeters wide. Make sure one end is cut to a point, as this makes fastening it to the hook easier. Fasten a 30 cm long piece of floss silk to the underside of the shaft, so that a few centimetres of the silk stick out in the direction of the eye. Keeping the rest of the floss silk taut along the underside of the hook, wind the tying thread back over the silk all the way to the bend in the hook. Wind the floss silk once exactly at the bend of the hook, keeping the material flat. Then twine the floss silk together with the tying thread to make a compact round thread. Wind the tying thread and the floss silk forward to make a segmented body, ending at the point where the short piece of floss silk is secured. Pull down the loose floss silk and carry on winding the body as far as the eye of the hook. Secure the floss silk properly with tying thread and a half hitch. Bend the back film forward and secure it on the back of the fly by ribbing gold wire evenly forward to the point where the loose floss silk is hanging. Release the back film and carry on ribbing the wire as far as the eye of the hook. Secure the gold wire firmly with tying thread to prevent it coming loose. Bend the rest of the back film forward over the thorax and secure it right behind the eye of the hook. Make a well-defined head using tying thread. Finish the tying activities with a strong whip finish knot. Trim off the loose floss silk fibres hanging down from the underside of the fly. These represent the legs of the larva, but are intended to create an illusion of movement rather than be an exact imitation of the legs. Colour the back film over the thorax using a dark, waterproof pen. If you want to add extra strength to the fly, varnish the head with superglue or fly tying varnish. If you want the fly to sink quickly, start by threading a 4mm tungsten head onto the hook. Then cover the shank with a closely wound layer of lead wire all the way to the tungsten head. Press the layer of lead wire forward so that the first turn is pressed in under the tungsten head. Fasten the tying thread and then turn forward in close, tight turns over the layer of lead wire. Continue winding on until you have a smooth underbody. Tie in a bunch of turkey feather fibres. Remember that they must be long enough to be bent over the entire length of the fly's back. Secure a 10 cm length of copper wire, which will then be used as ribbing. Cut off a piece of brown chenille. Pull the fibres off one end so that only the undercloth remains. Secure the stripped part of the chenille a little way behind the tungsten head. Twine the chenille and tying thread together. Wind on to make a body all the way back to the bend of the hook. Secure the chenille at the bend with a few tight turns of tying thread. Trim off excess material. Bend the turkey fibres over the back of the fly. Remember to spread out the fibres so that they really are evenly distributed over the entire back. Secure the turkey fibres by winding tying thread in even turns over the whole body. Trim the feather fibres to make a tail about 1/2 centimetre long. Wind the copper wire forward in the same turns as the tying thread until you get to where the thread is hanging. Dub the thread with loosely dubbed hair fibres. Wind on the dubbing to make a straggly thorax between the body and the tungsten head. Finish off the tying activities with a whip finish knot close to the tungsten head. Remove loose hairs so that the thorax will look more streamlined. The original design omits a tungsten head, but otherwise is exactly as shown. Start by threading a 3mm tungsten head onto the hook. Secure the tying thread and wind an even layer over the whole shank. Cut off 5 CDC fibres from a natural grey CDC feather. Fasten the fibres to make a tail on the upper side of the shank. Attach a 20 cm length of copper wire to the same point where the tail is secured. Adjust the copper wire so that it sticks out evenly on both sides of the tying thread. Bend the wire back and secure it with a few more turns of tying thread. Wind on the tying thread and bend down one end of the copper wire. Dub fly right onto the copper wire. Remember to add the dubbing in small amounts, otherwise the body may be uneven. Wind on the dubbing to form a thin, compact body, stopping when reaching the tying thread. The dubbed copper wire gives the fly a fantastic lustre when it's wet. You can use other colour combinations as well. Rib the fly anti-clockwise over the whole body with the remaining copper wire. Secure the ribbing properly in front of the body and trim off excess material. Dub the thread with olive green prism dubbing. If the dubbing won't fasten on the thread, wax the thread in advance, which will make things easier. Wind on a well-defined straggly thorax between the body and the tungsten head. Finish off with a whip finish knot close to the tungsten head.
So, these three flies are my favorite patterns for this technique. But while we were in the Czech Republic, we had the opportunity to see while Vladimir and Vit tied their flies in our hotel room. And this traditional Czech nymph was one of the flies they tied. And it was really interesting to see these guys tie their favorite flies for the Czech nymph technique.
Here I show you one of my best summer fly. It is green, light green, Czech nymph, typical Czech nymph. I use it together with two gold head nymph in the middle of the leader. I use it for grayling and for brown trout.
Start by giving the fly some weight with lead wire. Fasten the lead wire in the middle of the bend of the hook. Wind it on evenly to within a few millimetres of the eye. Fasten the tying thread at the eye and cover the lead wire with closely wound turns down to the bend of the hook. Fasten a 3 to 4 millimetre wide strip of back film in the bend. It's easier to fasten if you first cut one end to a point. Two sorts of ribbing are used for this fly. Start by fastening a length of silver wire and then a length of thin, transparent fishing line. Dub the rear part of the body with a thin layer of rabbit dubbing. Wind this to make the rear body, covering about 2/3 of the length of the hook shank. Dub the thread with a small amount of glitter dubbing and wind it onto the front of the body to form a well-marked heart, as the Czechs say. The rest of the thorax is covered with a darker, straggly rabbit dubbing. Dub the thread with small amounts at a time to produce a tight, compact dubbing. Rib the silver-coloured wire evenly over the whole body and fasten it firmly right behind the eye of the hook. Brush out the dubbing using a toothbrush with shortened bristles, for example. Bend the back film over the whole length of the fly's back and fasten it behind the eye of the hook. Fasten the film where desired by winding on the transparent fishing line, using close turns all the way to the eye of the hook. Secure all the material properly using a few extra half hitches of thread before cutting off. Wind on a fly head and finish the tying activities with a few tight half hitches just behind the eye. Paint the back film over the dark thorax using a waterproof felt pen. Give added strength to the fly by using a few drops of clear varnish or super glue to varnish the head.
Here I have the silverhead pheasant tail. It's our very good fly for competition, for grayling and white fish. We use it on the tip of the leader.
Start by putting a silver-coloured head on the hook. Cover the shank of the hook with closely turned tying thread up to where the bend of the hook starts. Fasten and shape some strands of partridge hen hackle to a tail, just in front of the bend in the hook. For ribbing, attach a thin, light copper wire to the same place as the tail. Dub the thread with a thin layer of brown rabbit dubbing. Wind the dubbing over the entire shank as far as the metallic head to form a compact body. Rib the copper wire evenly over the body and secure it behind the head with a few turns of tying thread. Brush out the dubbing using a toothbrush with shortened bristles. Use glitter dubbing on the thread, then double over the thread to make a dubbing loop. Use a dubbing twister to spin the loop, making a compact but straggly thread. Use the colourful dubbing to make a short but well-defined thorax behind the metallic head. Secure the dubbing loop and finish the tying activities with a few tight half hitches just behind the metallic head. Give the fly added strength by spreading some varnish over the knots.
My own special Czech nymph.
Start by covering the shank of the hook with closely wound lead wire. Fasten the tying thread and wind a few well spread out turns over the lead wire. This will keep the lead wire in place and stop it coming apart later. Secure a length of thin, transparent fishing line in the bend of the hook. Cut a 3 to 4 millimetre wide strip of either vinyl or flex body. Remember to shape one end to a point to make fastening it easier. Fasten the back film on the bend of the hook, but on the upper side of the shank. Use tying thread to build up an even underbody, so that the join between the lead wire and the hook is smoothed out. Use the tying thread to make a 10 cm long dubbing loop. Wax the loop and fasten small amounts of dubbing at a time between the threads of the loop. Make sure the loop is kept taut all the time, so the dubbing is held tightly between the threads. Spin the loop using a dubbing twister to form a compact dubbed thread. Turn the spun dubbing onto the fly to make a closely wound body. Notice in particular how little dubbing Vladimir uses to avoid overdressing the fly. Make a new dubbing loop where the previous one ended. Dub and spin the next colour as before. Finish winding on the rear body, which should cover about half of the hook shank. The thorax of the nymph should be clearly visible and is made of light pink rabbit skin, among other things. Dub on the rabbit fibres using a dubbing loop. Wind on the dubbing to make a pink thorax, but remember to leave some of the shank free, up to the eye, so there's room for the other material. Dub a very thin layer of glittery prism dubbing and wind it on just in front of the pink thorax. To make the fly look livelier, spin some dubbing for the front part of the thorax. Turn the plastic film over the entire back and secure it with tying thread behind the eye of the hook. Secure the fly with a whip finish knot before the next activity, otherwise the back film might come away. Rib the entire fly with the thin fishing line, using tight, even turns up to the eye of the hook. Notice that Vladimir keeps pulling the dubbing out of the way so it doesn't get caught up in the ribbing. Twine the ribbing and the tying thread together for a few turns and secure the ribbing with a few turns of thread. finish off the tying activities by turning a well-defined head from tying thread. Clearly mark the fly's thorax by painting the back film with a dark colour, using a waterproof felt pen. You can brush out the dubbing using a dubbing brush to give the fly even more life.
Mein gold medal nymph Sweden.
Give the fly some weight by covering the shank with closely wound lead wire as far as the bend in the hook. Secure tying thread in the bend of the hook and wind a few well-spaced turns over the lead wire to keep it in place. This fly is ribbed with two materials, a thin monofile fishing line and a thin red copper wire. Start by fastening a length of thin fishing line deep down in the bend of the hook. Secure the back shield at the same spot as the ribbing, and then wind on an underbody of tying thread to smooth out the edges of the lead wire. Make a dubbing loop from tying thread furthest back in the bend of the hook. Add dubbing in small, loose bunches between the threads of the loop. Note especially that the amount of dubbing increases the further out in the loop it comes. This allows you to prepare the shape of the fly in advance, as it should increase in thickness further along the shank. Use a dubbing twister to spin the loop, making a compact dubbed thread. If the copper wire hasn't been secured yet, it can be fastened with the spun dubbing loop before the body's wound. Wind on a gently tapering rear body over about 2/3 of the shank of the hook. Secure the dubbing loop well with tying thread when the body's completed. Rib the rear body with a red copper wire all the way to the tying thread. Make a new dubbing loop with tying thread. Wax the loop so that the dubbing will get a better grip between the threads. Put the natural squirrel dubbing between the threads of the loop, small bunches at a time. Use a dubbing twister to spin the loop, making a compact dubbed thread. Dub a well-defined thorax between the rear body and the eye of the hook. Bend the back strip over and secure it behind the eye of the hook using a whip finish knot. Wind the thin fishing line over the entire fly up to the eye of the hook, using tight, even turns. Secure the ribbing by first twining it together with the tying thread. Make a well-defined head using tying thread. Finish the tying activities with a strong whip finish knot. Finish off the fly by brushing out the dubbing fibres with a stiff dubbing brush. To define the fly's darker front, colour the back of the thorax with a waterproof pen.
You have now seen how to tie a handful really good nymph patterns for this technique. And to tie your own flies adds another dimension to fly fishing. It's not only fun to tie them in itself, but it also gives you a great possibility to make flies in great variations, different sizes, different weights, and different shades. If you'd like to learn more about this technique, about its history, the people and the flies, I would highly recommend Karol Krivanic's book Czech Nymph and other related methods. And you will also find a lot of more flies to tie with nice color pictures like these. The Czech nymphs are normally tied with cheap materials as you easily will find in most tackle shops in your country. So you now have a couple of real nice patterns to start with, and you know what materials to use. So let's start to fill up your fly books, and good luck.
After I get to the edge of the woods, I turn back upstream and have a really good look. There's always a risk of disturbing the fish, and even though I try to walk quietly, I still scare off a couple of them. As soon as I reach the river, I take the temperature, and it's perfect, despite the low water, just over 11 degrees. The sight of that big fish makes my heart beat faster. It looks really fine, and it's steadily rising. In the end, I decide to fish from the upstream side, even though there's always a greater risk of scaring the fish when you do that. There's not much space here, and I don't think I'll get a second chance. Must get it right first time. I roll out the fly as close to the fish as I can, and I feed out some loose line. Then I notice I'm holding my breath. For a time I think the fish has broken free under all the debris, but then I feel some strong pulls, it's still there, and my disappointment disappears.
Oj. Oj. Oj, oj, oj. En sån öring. Det är fantastiskt. Oh.
After releasing the chat into the cold water, I can only smile. What a marvelous start. What an absolutely beautiful fish. I don't need to make any more casts today. I'll walk up and see how Johan is doing.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah, it was like a truck. Yeah, I can't believe that.
Oh, look. Oh. Oh, you bastard! Wasn't even looking.
That's beautiful.
It's almost like a sea tree.
Yes. Yeah. Lovely. That is why I fish.
Absolutely.
Oh,
but what a
beautiful.
classic fish.
If you carefully shake the tip of the rod back and forth sideways, a wave-like movement is transmitted via the line out to the leader and the dropper. The irrational, wandering movement of the fly imitates the egg-laying of a female caddis and can usually attract the most reluctant trout or grayling. Even though the fishing hasn't really got going, the grayling couldn't resist rising for the skating dry fly. The morning's fishing with the skaters in the faster flowing parts of the river has been pleasant, and we've been rewarded with a really good grayling. The downstream free drift presentation allows the fly to fish downstream from the fisherman. The cast divided into two stages. A high rod stop makes the line accelerate forwards at high speed. Then the tip of the rod is pulled back slowly so the cast collapses. The line will then form loose loops between the tip of the rod and the fly. As the fly drifts on the current, the loops will straighten out.
Merci. That's a very nice fish. Oh, you've been